Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Student Spotlight series, where we showcase some of the work our past students have done. And today it is our pleasure to have with us William Zhang. So, William, can you tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, what year of school you're in, and a little bit about the course you took with CCIR?
Yeah, so I'm William. Currently, I'm a junior going to the International Academy in Michigan in the US. In CCIR, I did the data-based astronomy and machine learning class. And essentially what we did in that class was sort of blend in machine learning and like data tracking techniques while also incorporating like astronomy and astrophysics type stuff. So like a lot of the projects included detecting like exoplanets or classifying them using like machine like learning methods.
So, just to clarify, this is part of the Future Scholars program, right?
I Yes, I believe so.
So, how did you become interested in the program?
So I was looking at like sort of opportunities to become like a researcher because I'm really interested in sort of STEM subjects, and I was really interested in sort of the astronomy astrophysics space. Ever since I read Neil deGrasse Tyson's book about astronomy, like Welcome to the Universe, I believe that's the name. I sort of
Mhm.
like fell in love with astronomy and really wanted to do something with it. And so while I was searching for opportunities, I saw CCIR pop up a few times on my Google. I also, when I was on Instagram scrolling, I also saw CCIR. So I thought, why not? Let's check it out. And
Mhm.
I went through the different topics and found one that I really liked, and I followed it to the end. And yeah, here I am.
Yeah, so this is a bit of a tangent, but I'm curious. What did you find so captivating about astronomy?
Yeah, so since I was small, I really enjoyed kind of thinking about how the world came to be. And
Hmm.
the one thing that I found out, like using like Neil deGrasse Tyson's book, was figuring out about all these different kinds of items that the universe held and all the secrets that holds. Like starting from the Big Bang to where we are right now to what could potentially be like the end or the future of the universe. I've always been interested about astronomy and astrophysics and how this blends together to create the world that we currently live in.
Hmm. So, how does that interest relate to what you learned in the course or the structure of the course? Like, what kind of light do you feel like the course you took shed on those kind of fundamental questions for you?
hmm So I think for my course, because it blended both astronomy and sort of data science kind of features, I got to learn a bit about both. And as like a computer scientist, I wasn't that like too familiar with the whole Python machine learning, so having that experience definitely helped. But also with like the astronomy aspect, learning alongside like my mentor who is like renowned in the field of astronomy and astrophysics, it was really just nice to sort of learn these different ideas and learn even more than just through a book. And having an instructor by my side being able to sort of guide me through the ideas of like what even are exoplanets or what even are like transients and all these other like terminology, and following that with connecting back to what I previously knew and creating new connections to like new kinds of materials and new kinds of thought about how I wanted to proceed with my life or how I want to view like the world as a whole.
Mhm. Can you think of maybe like a specific instance when working directly with your instructor helped you learn something that maybe would have been a lot harder to learn just by reading a book?
Yeah. So when I was first introduced to the idea of transients, I was like really confused. So
Mhm.
having like just someone there who was familiar with the subject of what transients are, which were like the light rays emitted from like stars or planets or whatever that emits such like kind of light waves, I just like it only really helped me learning from a mentor, because when I tried to Google that myself, I didn't really understand the idea of it, especially now because I'm working a lot about like using transients in my research. Having a mentor
Mhm.
guide me through that process of first what are transients really helped, because I really did not understand using that like sort of terminology when I first read like Welcome to the Universe as a book, or just watched or just reading its like Wikipedia page.
So that's actually a great segue. Can you say a little bit more about what your research project was? I guess it involved transients.
Yeah. So my research project was essentially detecting anomalies in the TESS. So the forgot the name, but it's transient exoplanet like satellite survey. It was launched by MIT, and it was in
Hmm.
circulation from, I believe it was 2015 to through 2018 or 2022. I forgot like the exact date. But
Hmm.
essentially that sort of like satellite was able to capture a large part of the universe, and it was specifically looking for transients and exoplanets. So
Hmm.
using like the transient so using like transients, which are like light waves, my
Hmm.
job or like my project was essentially trying to detect any sort of anomalous features. And in the field of astronomy, anomalies are very, very rare, but when they pop up, they can be sort of like huge, huge deals, because that can be something that we've never seen before, or something that's extremely rare and only happens once in a lifetime that we've just found and we can like study more about. That also leads to future research in sort of like active learning, where we're actually finding what these anomalies actually are. So
Hmm.
my project was essentially just detecting which of these like light waves are sort of different from all the other ones, and what that could possibly be, and just measuring how many there are and which of the light curves from the test data set it was from.
Hmm. So I think you may have already said a little bit about this, but how did you choose the topic? And maybe what kind of support did you get from your instructor or TA in selecting a topic?
hmm So, originally our instructor gave us a few different topics, like a whole list of potential like projects that we could do. So I was looking through all these topics, and a lot of them was about classifying different planets, about like analyzing certain structures, or just creating like new classes and stuff. So when I saw like there was one just standing out to me, and it was just detecting anomalies. So
Hmm.
when I saw that, I was immediately thinking about how could this be used sort of in the future, or how would this like help me grow as like a researcher or as a student. So
Hmm.
having that ability, so like just looking at the project title and being like detecting anomalies using certain kinds of research or certain kinds of machine learning methods, you could like in my mind, I thought that not only could this pertain to a lot of different subjects and I could use like a ton of different methods, but also that this could pertain to a lot of other data sets. So not
Hmm.
only would like the test data set be able to be used in such a manner, but also potentially like other data sets that might come out in the future. So that
Hmm.
was really just something that I was interested in.
Hmm. So yeah, I guess would it be accurate to say that you were trying to sort of develop a general method for using machine learning to detect anomalies in these data sets, or?
Pretty much, I'd say that my end goal was essentially being able to use like these light rays and detect anomalies. So even though some other data sets might not have like all of the light curves and all of the measurements for that,
Mhm.
any of the data sets that did have those like light curves, I would be able
Mhm.
to use like the same kind of methods to detect that. And even for the data sets that didn't have light curves, I could still kind of use the same methods I did for light curves, just using a different kind of sort of measurement, like potentially like radiation or some other measurement.
So could you say a little bit more then about what your methodology was, or what the sort of research process was like?
Yeah. So the specifics of my like project was essentially using a variational autoencoder, which essentially takes a huge chunk of data, puts them all in a very tiny sort of compact space where which is called like a latent space, where all that data is sort of like being mushed together and creates a sort of like organized, but they're very that has a lot less data than what we inputted, and then it
Mhm.
spits out basically the best case scenario is an exact replica of what we put in. And essentially
Hmm.
what I did was we took that latent space and used it for example, clustering methods using a sort of HDBSCAN method in machine learning, which is essentially like clustering and figuring out which parts are anomalies, like which parts that stand out, which ones are far away from the clusters, and also using the autoencoder itself. Because when the autoencoder detects and sort of runs through all of this data, it sort of gains a sort of experience to what these light curves are. And for the
Hmm.
ones that it deems as sort of unusual, it would flag those it would flag those data that those objects, and I'd be able to take them out and report them as anomalies. And
Hmm.
my end goal was essentially to combine these two methods and see if their anomalies were managed to match up, because that would signify that they were very like clear anomalies that stood out from all the rest. And using two methods would basically like certify that.
So I guess, how did you situate your project in the existing literature on this subject? Or like, what kind of contribution did you feel like you were making?
I felt as so firstly, I think that the test dataset as itself is extremely new, and there are very little resources or papers about like analyzing the test dataset. There's also just very little like data about just creating these sort of variational autoencoder methods and using these other machine learning methods to sort of detect these anomalies. So I felt that I was sort of creating like a new system for specifically like the test data set, but also overall contributing to how um how like researchers and astrophysicists and astronomers were able to detect anomalies using like light curve rays or using like autoencoder methods and clustering methods and anything that really pertained to what I was doing in my project.
Hmm. So, do you have any sort of key insights at the end or takeaways, or was there anything that really surprised you during the process?
Um, I thought that so I would say that the hardest part for me in the entire project was just writing out the code. And it was actually very surprised to me about the overall process for creating like a research paper or creating this research project as a whole was actually quite simple, especially as like my instructor was able to guide me through all the steps. I think that my probably biggest takeaway was just be dedicated to whatever project I'm doing. Because no matter what, I think that the most important thing was that I was able to take this project that was quite difficult and
Hmm.
essentially stick with it because I was very dedicated to my ideas and what I was trying to accomplish, and take
Hmm.
that dedication and put that into work and put that into what I eventually have right now, where even though it's not completely finished, it's still at a point where I'm pretty happy with the overall result, and there's just some tiny bit of fine tuning left, which I really think would give me like sort of a stand or a foundation for what I do in the future and what potential like projects I do like as a college student, or even like next year as a senior in high school I could do a lot of other projects using the same sort of ideas that I gathered through CCIR through this year with
Hmm.
my current project.
So, I mean, in some ways, I feel like you've already answered this question, but from the sounds of it, it seems like, I guess, do you feel like the program has prepared you well to do future research? I mean, it sounds like you feel like you've developed, I guess, hard and soft skills that you can continue to apply doing research in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that after this year, I really learned a lot about writing papers. And
Hmm.
especially last year when I first applied for CCIR and first applied to do the database astronomy project, I was sort of nervous and sort of terrified even of starting a sort of research project because I've never really done anything quite like it, writing 3, 4, 5 to like 10-page long research papers about a certain topic and working on
Hmm.
that for like a few months. I never really had that experience or like knowledge of how to even start before. So I really think
Hmm.
that CCIR opened my eyes to how research is actually done in the fields. And I think
Hmm.
that with what I've learned from CCIR, I'm much more confident about what I do in the future, about the potential research that I do in the future, and the fact that just because I have to write like a 10, 15-page report or just trying to start a project, I don't think that will scare me anymore in the future.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely feel like a lot of the difficulty of doing of doing anything is going into it knowing that you can do it, you know?
Yeah.
And I suppose
Mhm.
like just knowing that you have done it and as a result there's no sort of inertia stopping you from doing it in the future, I think is pretty powerful. Um, so you mentioned that you haven't finished the paper yet. What are the next steps or what do you feel like is left to do?
So right now, I'm sort of in the troubleshooting phase because what is happening right now is that certain parts of my code isn't really lining up. I'm not too satisfied with the results of the code, so I'm not quite
Hmm.
ready to just put them into like a paper and like publish that. So right now,
Hmm.
I'm just trying to do some troubleshooting methods, find out whether it is like the clustering method or the autoencoder method that's somehow like gone wrong, or there was like a misinput somewhere, and
Hmm.
I just need to sort of find like the missing link essentially, and find what is wrong in the code in order to sort of proceed and be able to continue and be able to really just finalize the project and finalize like the anomalies and finalize like my methods as well.
Hmm. So you mentioned that you're going to be meeting with the instructor to talk about that next week, right?
Yeah. Mhm.
So
So yeah.
no, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I was in contact with my instructor for a few weeks now, and we've been trying to find a time to meet because a lot of these different issues I personally can't like find the nitty-gritty details. And I hope that like meeting with my instructor and just going through like the code with him would be able to give some sort of insight because he is really um he has a really good ability to see what is wrong in the code and helping me to try and figure out how to fix that code and like what went wrong and just trying to find out how to sort of resolve the issue.
Mhm. So you mentioned earlier that you don't feel ready to publish the paper, but once you're done, is that something that you plan to do?
Yes, absolutely. I think that right now the only reason why I haven't gone to the next step of like finalizing and publishing the paper is really because I'm not exactly satisfied with the end result right now, which is due to like the sort of errors in the code that I'm trying to figure out right now, that I'm trying to meet with my instructor to also figure out right now. So I think that once I pretty much get that tuned up and get that fixed, this paper
Mhm.
would be ready to be published.
Mhm. And you do feel like the support structure is in place for you to work out whatever the remaining issues are and move on to potentially publishing the paper, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the fact that the instructor is still guiding me through like all these different kinds of phases in this research, guiding me through sort of what I did wrong, I think is really, really important in helping me sort of finalize this paper and get it out there and sort of just like finalize sort of my original like goal for CCIR and just be able to sort of help me achieve that end goal.
Mhm. And if you were going to speak to someone who was about to do a similar program, who was coming in with maybe minimal research experience, do you have any advice you would give them, or is there anything that you wish you had known earlier?
I would say to not be scared and to open up to your instructor or your TA and just be able to ask a lot of questions. Because what I did in the beginning of the course, I wasn't asking too many questions, and I think that that sort of hindered my progress a bit. But later
Mhm.
on, as I started working more and more into the codes, into the like all of the details, I sort of had a ton of questions I need to ask. So
Mhm.
like as I started asking them, I started to understand the content more and my project started to develop much quicker. So I'd
Hmm.
say to don't be shy and to just talk to your instructors and your TA and even with like your like peers because the one I was in it was like a group. If you have like peers, don't be afraid to also talk to them too because when I was having some issues, I posted like I asked like a question in the general like chat room with my instructors, the TA, and my peers, and one of my peers helped me out with some of the code. So just try and be able to sort of engage with all the people involved, and not only can you learn a lot and like finish your project and like develop your project, but you might also come away with like an instructor that you particularly enjoy being around with or learning from and like peers that you could connect to all around the world.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think that definitely something that I think I see a lot in students is that they don't always use all the resources that are available to them. You know, like the
Mhm.
teachers and TAs are there to be a resource for you. And you should really, like, the best way to learn is definitely to put yourself out there and ask a lot of questions and not be shy. So yeah, I think that's definitely a good lesson, you know, and something that's worth knowing, especially going into like a kind of small course where you have the advantage of having a lot of direct access to your instructor. Um,
Mhm.
so do you have any final thoughts about your experience that you'd like to share?
My final thoughts would probably be that I think generally the experience was well, it introduced me to a very sort of overwhelming kind of like structure of like publishing a paper, which is kind of overwhelming. But I think
Yeah.
the overall structure of the program, how it divides up the time, is enough to for your, like me or like another student to be able to um sort of like finish their project on time and be able to achieve a lot of the original goals that one might set out to do. Like
Hmm.
I was able to achieve a lot of the goals that I wanted to do, except obviously with like a tiny bit of issues now, but I'm going to get that resolved soon and going to be able to sort of publish my paper, which is my end all be all like final goal. So I
Hmm.
think that overall, I'd say that CCR does a really good job in just managing the time efficiently, which I think is a huge thing that a lot of students sort of struggle with. I know that um, I sometimes struggle with time management, but the overall schedule that CCR provides is really helpful for like a student like me who has to deal with school and other programs during even like time of CCIR. It's really flexible for students and really manageable for us to sort of work through and sort of develop what we want to achieve at the end.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it seems like the goal of publishing a paper, it's overwhelming for sure.
Mhm.
But having like a structure in place that can guide you through each step or break it up into pieces that are individually manageable, um, yeah, that seems like something that would be a huge help. Um, but yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed hearing about your experience and your research. And I wish you the best of luck in finishing up your paper. I'm sure, you know, I'm sure whatever obstacles are there now, you'll figure it out. So yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yep. Thank you so much too. I really enjoyed talking to you as well.